Welcome back to another episode of Cobra Kai Companion, and I am Peter.
And I am Brianna.
And you guys, special episode, special guests. We're back to another interview format here. This time we have two. Two heads are better than one, I think they say.
Yes.
Is that a thing?
That's what we
Yeah.
say.
All right. So for those that don't know, we have joining us today Cobra Kai writers Joe Piarulli and Luan Thomas. Greetings, gentlemen.
Whoop, hang on
Hey.
a second.
Hey, thanks for having us.
I've got to fix something. I don't know what I did.
Fix it, Brianna.
Yeah. So
Okay.
while you're fixing that, can I just go ahead and continue?
Yes, go for it.
Okay. I want to congratulate you guys for being part of this amazing show, #1 in the world, baby.
Woo! Woo!
We did it. There was never any doubt, was there?
No,
No.
not at all. Everyone's just two years late, but it's
Yeah.
fine. We're all here. We're all together, sharing it. But did you guys do anything to celebrate?
I think separately we did something. I'm in New Jersey actually, and Luan's in LA, so we kind of took our day off from doing any writing and anything like that, and just had some fun, did some drinking, and
Yeah, I had a nice scotch, and a little bit. It's nice. It's just it's nice that everybody's enjoying it. It's just
Yeah.
we've always wanted people to enjoy it, and now a lot of people are enjoying it.
Oh, sure. You guys must be really proud.
Yeah, it's a good.
Brianna, you wanna start with something? I kind of already asked about that.
Hang on.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
still getting the thing set up right in the window. It's all
Get
messed
your
up.
house in order, Brianna.
Yeah. Luan wasn't even on the screen for a second there, so
as
there
as
we
long
go.
as people can hear us.
yes.
So why don't you guys start off with when did you guys decide to become a writer? Did you always want to be a writer? Was acting ever a thing? Directing, film?
Definitely not acting. I think I
Oh.
did both of us. I mean, we kind of started I think for me really young in storytelling, and television wasn't really the thing at the time. For me, it was actually horror movies. When I was 5 years old, 6 years old, I would make my mom go to Blockbuster every weekend and rent a bunch of horror movies. I don't know why I was just obsessed with Chucky and The Exorcist and Freddy Krueger and all that stuff. And I was I can scare people too. So I got into this thing of I would scare my cousins, and I would tell them stories about the seaweed monster on the beach and all these kind of crazy stuff. And I ended up writing those kind of stories when I was young and into high school. And I just got a message actually this week from one of my high school English teachers I knew it. I knew this was going this direction because that's all I ever wanted to do. So actually, when I moved out to LA, it was to write horror movies. That was the thought. And Luan and I met really pretty early after I'd moved out there. And when we started writing together, it just kind of took its own direction. But I don't know, Luan, if you want to talk about your earlier days of that stuff.
Oh yeah, gosh. I mean, for me, it was gangster films. It was I grew up in New York City, so it was Goodfellas and Casino, and it was this Scorsese sort of kind of low street level gang.
Oh, Luan, you're getting freezy.
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
He said the word gangster, and then he froze. There's a conspiracy here.
Oh, I froze.
Oh,
there
yeah.
you go.
There. Okay, you're back.
You're back. You froze in a very aggressive position. You're
He really did.
That's pretty
Where
good.
did I leave off at Jaws or Nightmare on Elm Street?
somewhere in
Goodfellas
there.
Casino.
Goodfellas, Casino, and then I got Jaws is my favorite film, and then I got out here and I was I really like horror as well, and Nightmare on Elm Street, something I grew up with, and a lot of other horror films, but for the most part I wanted to start writing gangster films. And then when Joe and I met, we kind of oh, what about TV? And we sort of went off from there. And so
I know the timing of of us meeting was also we worked, so we met at a management company. We were assistants, and it was a company that represented writers and directors and things like that. And we kind of, we bonded over, we were kind of the new guys at that job, and we bonded over sports and television and things like that. And it got to a point after a year we were we could write something as good as a couple of these things out here. So we ended up, and part of it was bonding over our family stories. We both have kind of unusual families, and I think we were kind of thinking how many guys our age are writing sitcoms now. It seems it's all 50 and 60-year-old guys. So we started writing comedy first, and I think did that well enough that suddenly we were getting interest in other kinds of shows. And if you look at like our credits, it ended up not being really like sitcom stuff at all. Like we really never ended up doing any of that. But writing that stuff really helped get us into it. So that started us on the path here.
Have either of you ever thought, I mean, looking at your credits, it's obviously very matchy. You've never done anything not as a team. Have either of you ever thought of doing anything independently, or will you always be together?
You know what? This will be, you saying that, Brianna, will be the thing that splits us up.
Oh.
No.
We've never thought about this, Brianna. We've never actually broached this.
I'm a curse.
We kind of always love the same things, and every time we talk about an idea, it's something we enjoy writing together. So it's always just like, well, if we're going to go out for the show, like it would be good to have both of us and like get our different perspectives. I know, the way we kind of approach everything, and it's true actually of our Cobra Kai episodes too, is we find something that one of us knows intimately and like cares really deeply about, like something that's going to make us cry if we like dig deep on it, and then have the other person sort of serve as like the audience's perspective. Because what you don't want to do is like get so far in the weeds on your own thing that you make it impossible for someone else to access it. So I think when we find like, if we write a story about Luan's family, then I serve as an outside perspective, and vice versa if we're writing something about my family, or if we're even in, and just to jump it back to Cobra Kai a little bit, there's a scene in one of our episodes where Daniel's talking about his dad, and the day at Coney Island, and talking with his mom. I lost my dad about 10 years ago, and writing that scene was just like, Luan, listen, I'm going to take a run at this thing and like dig deep on like a memory I have about my dad, and we're going to find like something that really like is going to make people cry, or at least make me cry. And then Luan sort of serving as like the outside perspective on what about the story is going to draw people in and things like that. So we kind of always look for those things, and I think to this point, it's always been something that we wanted to do together, and it makes us an effective team. So never say never. I mean, I think we have certainly interests that are outside of that, but so far so good.
Well, I will say specifically to that episode, Lucille looks a lot like my mom, and I lost my dad when I was 29, and you absolutely hit it. That's exactly what I felt like watching it was, oh my God, this is Daniel talking about me losing my dad. It was perfect.
Yeah, and it's also like tying it into the story and making it feel like all this stuff is interconnected, because the story for Daniel in that episode was also like trying to find the small moments and go back to your roots a little bit in your relationships. And I know it's like, for me, it wasn't, when you think back to the big days with your family or anything like that, it's often not the ride or the crazy thing. It's like sometimes it's the small moment with somebody, and that just tied so well into Daniel's story and into the episode in general being about love in different stages. Because we had Johnny and Carmen in a certain stage, and Johnny like exploring dating still in that episode, and you had Robbie and Sam in a certain stage, and Tori and Miguel in a certain stage. So that's just a fun episode when you like have a thematic tie-in, and I think Luan and I both brought as much of our lives into that kind of story as we could.
And we try to get a lot of those small moments in there. Those like small but still impactful moments. Like, those quiet,
Yeah.
I love that one.
So can you guys give any insight onto why there is a writing team, like the two of you, versus to those that like to work independently, kind of like Brianna asked? We know that John and Hayden wrote Harold and Kumar together, and American Reunion, which they also wrote and directed.
Yeah,
I think
sorry,
go. I was going to say, well, I mean, you get the two set of eyes on it. It keeps you from sort of the tunnel vision of just one perspective, like what Joe was alluding to before. Like, it's really great to be able to check your idea. Like, you have your idea and you have a sounding board there, and then, both people bringing their separate ideas together, and when it works, it's great. You find, that's why you're mixing basically, you take powder by itself for iced tea, and then you mix it with water, and then you have great iced tea, or you have great, some sort of Kool-Aid.
You can tell on Josh and Hayden where like have worn off on us because we immediately go to like food and drink metaphors like they always do. It's also, I'll just add, like, there's something like kind of isolating about being a writer most of the time. And I think when you think about like great writers and the way you see them, you are thinking about guys drinking scotch in the mountains by themselves and coming up with like those stories. But for us, it was always just more fun to like have a friend that you can write with. And that's what television writing is about anyway. It's more than any other kind of writing, like incredibly collaborative, where you're in a room with a lot of different people who bring different perspectives. And I think that's just always appealed to us. You know, we wrote on our own, obviously, before we met, but there's something about just like throwing ideas up there that makes the whole process so much easier. It almost feels like, especially when you get a writer's assistant involved, like we have in the TV rooms, where they kind of write down everything you say, and it's like a lot of your job is done for you just by talking it out. You know, you don't actually have to be sitting at the keyboard. And Luan and I, a lot of times, don't sit at the keyboard together. It's just that we talk it out and we make sure that all those ideas are noted somewhere. And then when you get to your script, you have it all just laid out. And then it's just a matter of like chipping away at the marble because you have the whole structure already.
Non-specific to Cobra Kai, because, you know, anything season 3 and beyond we obviously can't get into. Have you two been involved in any of the virtual writers' rooms that exist because of COVID right now for other shows?
It is a thing that's caught on, and I think Luan and I took to it fairly naturally because we are used to working apart. The hardest thing is not having your board in front of you, which, you know, if you've seen what writers' rooms look like, it's a lot of index cards and whiteboards and everything plastered on the wall for every idea. And it's really helpful to, as a group, be able to look at, you know, act 1 of this story and look at every beat in there and have it all just in front of you. So that's kind of been the hardest thing. But there are like really impressive technologies now, like the one, like the Miro board thing is pretty cool.
Yeah, those are great. But I also miss people. You miss the people, you know, you miss the sort of like the human interaction of just whether it's the sidebar, walking to the car, discussing how great the day went or how bad or whatever. Just all those little things of just literally seeing, like, you know, I haven't seen Joe. I used to see Joe every day for years. I haven't seen Joe in, I don't know, the longest we've been apart.
I know, it's months. Like I've been actually in New Jersey at the beach. Like I don't need to be in LA right now, so I'm just gonna go like hang out at the beach. And Luan's been in LA, and it's just like we've been talking like this most of the time. So it's you know, that's something we've gotten used to a little bit. And then it's also like, you know, it's not just writers' rooms, but it's also taking general meetings with people. It's, you know, pitches, which the TV process is like really hinges on like pitching ideas to people and pitching shows to networks. So all of that has changed in a way that, you know, some of it may never go back to exactly how it was, which, you know, for better or worse. But
that's got to be really difficult because you guys, when you guys are getting into meetings, you have to coordinate a certain time away from your families and to get on the camera, you know, where before, like, you're already, you know, at your offices and there's a meeting at a certain time and you just show up.
Yeah.
So before we get into more about the writing aspect, I want to know, what are your guys' earliest memories of The Karate Kid and what it was like when you landed Cobra Kai?
Luan, you want to start?
Yeah, for me, my earliest memory was the Halloween dance, and it's coming around. Like, him running for his life and running into the fence for me is like, as like a little kid, that was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. I was like, this poor boy's getting chased by a group of guys just as skeletons, and, you know, they beat the piss out of him. I was like, that was as impactful as a shark in Jaws, you know, for me. It's like, oh man.
Yeah, for me, and I'm gonna upset some people by saying this, I was not born yet when The Karate Kid came out, so my memories were like the Blockbuster VHS of it, and actually weirdly, like, more in my wheelhouse was like Three Ninjas, because that was like directly for my age. So I think I probably saw that before I saw The Karate Kid, which just keeps you weird. If you've ever had that with movies where you've seen the ripoff first. It's
it took me forever to watch Jaws.
Yeah, it's so weird because you've heard the lines, or like you've seen the tropes of it, and it's just like a strange deconstruction to walk it back. But, you know, for me, I connected immediately because I'm a skinny Italian kid from Jersey who has now moved to California. So there's like way too much of that stuff that's like very close to my life. So still to this day, and I know I'm sure this will come up, but like Daniel is just the idea of writing for Daniel LaRusso just blows my mind, and it's a character that I just have always related to, and I think that's why it's been great that we've been able to write really cool Daniel storylines in some of our episodes, and so yeah, those early memories are tied into everything that happens now. And Luan and I have had the good fortune to actually be on set for mostly for season 3, which we obviously can't talk about, but just having all of those first time walking into some of these sets and the first time meeting some of these people is just like really insane.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question to that kind of. Oh gosh, now I'm trying not to think about season 3. Getting a little excited there. Is it safe to say, prior to you guys becoming writers on Cobra Kai, it sounds like you guys were both kind of Team Miyagi-Do?
Yeah, I think it takes a special kind of insight to see the other side of it when every movie that's made during that time is like designed to put you on one side of the story. So it's like the movie is not designed for you to see Johnny's perspective. The fact that you are able to do that is just credit to like to Robert Mark Heyman and the original performances, but it's really hard to see that side until you get to where we are now.
And also Miyagi. I mean, you have sort of like, growing up with Star Wars, and you have this sort of Yoda, Obi-Wan, you have this God basically there kind of inspiring. So it's hard to be on the team, it's hard to be on Kreese's team at that moment,
Yeah.
So when you found out, well, first of all, how did you get hooked up with the big 3? How did you get that? Because speaking from myself, this would be like the dream job of all dream jobs. How did you get this?
Incredible luck. Because I mean, if you look at our other shows, and I don't know if anybody's caught up on this, but some of the other shows we've worked on are The Tick for Amazon, which we grew up with the comic books and the cartoon. So that was one where it's like, oh my God, we're going to be able to do this. And then Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is maybe that show and South Park are probably the 2 biggest reasons I wanted to be a TV comedy writer. So we've kind of had like 3 or 4 dream jobs in a row. But I credit for this one specifically just our like good representation from our agents and managers who knew the kind of stuff that we liked and would be good at. So this kind of came up from them because I think we were coming off of, and it also came
Tick.
We were coming off of The Tick, which was a Sony show, and the people at Sony liked us, and I think they kind of put in a recommendation when Cobra Kai was starting up, and just timed out well where The Tick was finishing up, and we didn't know if there would be a season 2 there, and Cobra Kai was starting, and they sent in. The way the process works in general is they send in a sample of your writing. So they sent in a very like raunchy comedy that we had written that obviously appealed to John, Josh, and Hayden. And
the kings
so we were
of raunchy comedy.
Yeah, we got the meeting on that, and then just connected with the guys. I don't know, Luan, do you remember like specifics from that meeting and the like?
It's so funny. I remember going into that meeting, and it was in that huge office, and I remember Josh on his computer like away, and I remember just talking to John and Hayden, and I remember Josh not talking to us, and I was like, "Oh my God, Josh doesn't like this isn't gonna work."
I don't remember that at all. Like I'm sure I'm totally I know that's for sure true, but and actually I'll tell a story that I don't think Josh even knows probably. I don't think I ever told him the story. But when I moved out to LA, I was interning at some production companies, and 90% of what I was doing was reading scripts. And the way they prepared me to like know what a good script was and what a bad script was is they gave me like some bad scripts and they gave me some good scripts. And in my good script pile was Hot Tub Time Machine, which hadn't been made at that point, and it became like my favorite script. And I like shared it in order to seem cool with my friends back home. I like shared the script with them. I was like, this isn't out yet, so you can't share this with anybody, but like check this out. It's gonna be a movie. And that's just like how I was like the cool guy to my friends. Like I'm in LA now and I can get scripts for things that aren't made. But I love that script so much. And going into that meeting, I was like, I'm just gonna make sure I don't like tell that story or do this in a fanboy way. And because the other side of it too is like I really got backed into the corner because the other one was like Harold and Kumar, which was set in my hometown in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. So of course my immediate thing was like, well, there's no White Castle in Cherry Hill. Like, I gotta say something to him, right? And I never did because I was like in that meeting, like we were too amped up on Karate Kid stuff. So I don't know. I guess it worked out.
I know they were like our comedy heroes, and we didn't want to like fan out over like Harold and Kumar. I mean, like in Hot Tub Time Machine, it's perfect. It's just
it's amazing. Yeah, for anyone that's interested, we did we did have an interview with Josh where he came back and talked about that script. Oh my gosh.
The script is so good, by the way. I don't know what version of it you read or what he
it's
talked
really
about.
Good.
Like his with whatever draft I read of Hot Tub Time Machine, there wasn't even like an explanation about the time travel, or there wasn't no Chevy Chase character in it.
Oh wow!
So it was like a totally different approach to it, but it's incredibly funny, and I know he wrote like, probably 10 versions of it, but.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that you were potentially like a leaker to TMZ or something in advance.
Yeah, I'm very dangerous. That's why like Luan and I were like, all right, we're gonna do this interview because we love Peter and Brianna, and we really have to try hard not to spoil season 3 because we are so susceptible to this kind of stuff that I'm like, we're very dangerous between the two of us.
That's okay because we don't really want to know.
Yeah,
so
I know. No. Spoil it for you guys because it's. Here's one thing I'll tell you about season 3. It kicks so much ass you'll probably go blind. It's so awesome.
Wow.
Yeah,
I like that. But that was a great. I remember that meeting them, the big 3 for the first time, and that was. I remember we left. I was worried because of Josh. I didn't think Josh liked this, but I was like, this could be great. I was like, these guys are awesome. Like it was like we're meeting friends. So it was really cool. And we had similar backgrounds from where from the Northeast. So there were a lot of notes that we were all on at the same time. So it felt right.
And it's
just,
gotten deeper.
Knock on wood, it worked.
It's really gotten to a place where like there is just such a shared language between us. Like if you stumble into a Cobra Kai room ever, you'll hear like you may hear like a stray like quote from Orgasmo. Or something like some really like thing that like not enough people would be able to quote that. So we just think every once in a while there's a moment in the room where it's like all the right people were in the right places to get everybody together. You would hear Bloodsport references and things like that. So it's it's hard not being with everybody now because that's like always the best times are when you're in Cobra Kai writers' rooms with everybody. But we're always in touch with the guys, and there's always ideas floating around. We always have like a text chain with them with ideas because the hope is that we'll be doing this for a long time, so there's always ideas going back and forth.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. Brianna, did you ask something?
Yeah, that was actually my question about how they got the job.
Okay.
Which was fantastic. Thank you.
Oh no, absolutely, yeah. Sometimes, and that's the thing that we've learned with speaking with a lot of people. Sometimes it's luck. Right place, right time, all that. Now, can you guys take us through like the process of writing in the writer's room? Like, how do you guys even decide who's going to write what episode? Because I learned from Hayden the difference between credited story by versus teleplay by, which for you guys did Quiver, Glory of Love, and No Mercy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of... to answer the second part of that question, it's, the guys are the ones who decide who writes what script. And they just have such a good hand. It's almost like a coach, in basketball or anything else. Like you just know when to tap the right person for the right episode. And you get a sense of just what the rhythm of the season is going to be, what the big moments in the season are going to be, and who you want, tapping into those kind of things. And, writers all have different skill sets, and I think the guys are more than anybody on the pulse of what the people they hire can do. So they're really, really tuned into that stuff. And speaking to the larger process of it, Luan, I don't know if you want to talk about like how the season kind of breaks out and, how you end up with like story and teleplay, things like that, or like the larger beats of things. But
well, yeah, I mean, I guess for that part, when we go in, you kind of do a big overview of what the season's going to be. We dump out what the whole season, like just the big benchmarks. And then we sort of, kind of day by day, week by week, break it out into each sort of episode and each beat within each episode. And then, we have stuff that will kick over to the next episode or this might be right here for now, but everything's subject to change. And then from, I guess, right out, then you kind of assign the scripts out, and then everybody sort of works together on the outline, and then somebody goes off and they outline and on the script, and then you're on to the next one. But you keep the boards up in the room, and some things that we might have wanted for one episode in this season won't work, so it moves to the next one. But you keep all those ideas up there, and the writers' assistants have been great, and they take such great notes, and they sort of kind of make sure that we don't forget anything, and that we have everything available to us.
Yeah.
So it's, I would say that's the kind of overview process of how that breaks down.
Yeah. It's always evolving. I mean, there's stuff that gets written on set too. And there are times where, because it's a really serialized show, just in the sense that like things that are going to happen in episode 10, sometimes you want to set up in episode 1. So there'll be times where we'll kind of like backfill things, and be tracking back on a storyline rather than, all the way forward. I know that's, something we kind of did in season 1 was once we knew, that Louis was going to mess with Johnny's car and things like that, then we did some work going backwards to build in Louis and make it feel like, get some foreshadowing in there, in the sense of like what Louis' attitude is towards this guy and what his general attitude is. And when he's saying the Wesley Snipes stuff of like, you got to do this thing and all that. So that's some of that is like you find the characters, the deeper you get into the story. And of course you find the characters when you get the actors in. So season 1's always the hardest to write really on any show. And that's just... you got to nail the tone in season 1. Season 1's all, it's always about nailing the tone, setting the table, like another food analogy. You're going to eat, set the table. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any, stepping into this 34 years later and being responsible for the voices of 2 such iconic characters as Johnny and Daniel, did you have any hesitation, any intimidation, or did you feel like you knew them right off the bat?
I think pretty big hesitation in some ways. I mean, like to go into like what season 1 was like. I know, Luan and I got hired off of really comedy shows. I think we had done Always Sunny and The Tick and Gallivant on ABC, which is pretty comedic network thing that like. So when we come into Cobra Kai, like a lot of our mindset was, we want to make sure we're getting the jokes and that we're pulling our weight in terms of the comedy side of it. But when you start to learn the tone of the show, like you guys know that's in there, but it's not front and center. So, we really had to, find the right voices for the characters, and that includes the new characters. But I think what made it easier for us is we have a safety net, which is John, Josh, and Hayden being the guys, the curators of all this stuff. So if we miss, they're there to catch it. But the deeper we get in the show, the less they have to do catching. So, when we got towards, our later season 2 scripts, there was a lot more of our stuff ends up being in the final cut of those episodes. And some of the big things in season 1 were there, a lot of the flipping the script stuff, but there was that trick of like, okay, how much confidence do we have in like being able to write these characters that we just know from the movies? But then you also have a realization of like, well, that's kind of what we're all doing though. It's like, that's what John, Josh, and Hayden are doing too. So it's like, it gets a little less scary the more you get into it. And now, of course, it's gotten a lot easier because we have relationships with the guys and with Ralph Macchio, and like you can talk to him about the character and you can get answers to those things. So that everything gets easier and easier.
And I think it helps that we're super fans. There were super fans, but we were in our own right super fans. Like no matter when we found the movie and everything, it's still as iconic. Like the movie still hits me today as hard as it hit me when I was 10, when I was 7. Like it's still great. I still get goosebumps like everybody, and I think that goes for all the writers in the room. I would imagine everybody still gets goosebumps.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you guys have to do some reverse engineering when it comes to plotting episodes out too, and planting the seeds and stuff. I think maybe we can get into some of the episodes now, some of the specifics.
Sure.
In Quiver, I've always been fascinated with the, Johnny having this bigger class, and he has to filter out all these people. But the whole thing about getting in rows and lines, like, what do you guys remember about that dialogue? And then like going down and undressing every single kid about their physical attributes.
I mean, what more could you want for an episode is to be able to write that? Like Johnny making fun of kids. It's just like, I think everybody in the writer's room probably got a line in that episode because there's so many funny things to do with it. Yeah, so I know that's one where like, maybe one of my favorite lines in the show that we didn't write is actually in our episode. And that's just something that happens in TV is like you're kind of working on everything together. But I think it was like Hayden's line where that is, you know, I don't know what I like when Eli's saying I might be on the spectrum and Johnny says, I don't know what that is, but get off it pronto.
That's one of mine too.
Hayden one, but there were, I mean, just a lot of fun lines doing that and I don't know, everything about Johnny being in the class. And what I will say, too, is, like, that was kind of a turning point episode somewhat in the way that, like, Johnny views his role as a sensei, too, because... And I feel like that was probably a lot to ask, you know, for Billy to be, like, mean to kids, knowing that, like, it was going to turn kids away from the dojo. Because it did, and it had to. But, like, that's kind of where you had to go with the character in that moment to get it to a place where... he sees the error of his ways and he remembers what things were like for him.
Oh, okay, there we go. We're back. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but I guess my internet burped. Okay.
No. So. I hope you didn't lose. As you can see, I can talk a mile a minute anyway, so I can recap everything in seconds if you need me to. It's very exhausting, I think, but Luan slows me down once in a while. He's a little more of the change up, and I'm more of the fastball.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, another thing about that scene when he comes in and everybody's, for me, it's like the Bad News Bears, you know, when he looks at those kids and it's like, you guys, this is, and I played football, gosh, when I was a kid through Pop Warner, through high school, and it was, you know, you remember when it's a mess. You remember when the coach has to blow the whistle or whatever to kind of get everybody to line up. Somebody, as a kid, you don't take it seriously. And so it's like, you know, and Johnny's still kind of like, all right, how am I going to do this? He said the only way he knows how to do this is to scream and yell and be mean, because that's his only, at this moment, that's his only sort of, that's his only mode, his only gear shift. So it was fun. It was a fun one, right?
The flashbacks are so critical to that because you have to like get to a place where like you're learning that some of this is coming from Johnny's insecurity. And I think, you know, at that point in the series, we hadn't really done that many flashbacks. You know, you'd done flashes to the movie, but you weren't seeing new scenes that much. So I think that was a cool opportunity for us to explore some of that and get into Johnny's character. And I think it really like, it helps what's happening, you know, modern day for Johnny in a way that you don't feel like the flashbacks are taking you out of the present day story. That's always the danger if you're leaning on flashbacks as a crutch for things. So we always are looking for a way, if we're doing that, to make it really integrated into what's happening in those moments. And even to the point where, you know, he's putting on the headphones because he can't listen to another fight between Sid and his mom. But that ties in also, I think it's in the episode right before that, you see Robbie do the same thing. You know, when his mom comes in with a guy, he puts on his headphones. So, like, we're always looking for those things that tie the generations together and make you feel like you're getting the modern story, even if you're hearing, you know, even if you're getting into some flashback stuff too. So.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
So when it comes to, especially with season 1, there's so many iconic scenes just in that one season, and you guys got to write what is quite possibly one of the best character entrances ever, because you guys wrote Enter the Hawk. So how did you feel like getting to know that you were going to be the ones to introduce that character? How did that whole introduction come around?
Man, that's one where, like, you know it's going to be awesome, so you can't screw it up, because that's something that gets talked about from day one, of like, you're meeting this kid in the early episodes and you're seeing what he's like. And I know for me, like, and maybe it's part of the reason we ended up writing that episode, is like that character. You know, when I was a kid, I had like Coke bottle, like thick glasses, which is kind of what like turned me to go to Blockbuster every weekend, is because like that's what I was doing instead of like, you know, hooking up with babes, as Johnny would say. But and it's still like my vision is I don't know if anybody wears glasses or anything like that, but I'm a -9.5 prescription.
Wow.
Like, legally blind. So that just tells you, like, that's the kid who's, like, you can't even tell how big their eyes are because the glasses are so big. You're like, whoa. So I was, like, having a story about a kid who's going something like that and coming around the other side and, like, changing who he is. For me, this was, I guess, when Eminem was popular because I, like, dyed my hair blonde was, like, my... So, actually what I did was I put lemon in my hair and I hung out in the sun for, like, the entire summer because I, like, promised my dad I wasn't going to dye my hair, and then I did the lemon thing instead, and he's like, you cheated.
Oh, you Sugar Ray'd. That's a Sugar Ray move.
Yeah.
That's a Sugar Ray move.
Yeah. Yeah, it probably was that. But I don't know, that character and that moment just, like, solidifies so many cool things that give John Josh and Hayden, again, all the credit in the world for setting him up properly and having the foresight to, know that you have a great underdog on your hands and just the arc, from where he starts to where he is now.
Jake, and he pulled it, and he's great. I mean, he pulled that off. He's just so good. He is such a good actor. He crushed that scene.
Oh, crushes every scene.
Yeah. It's
so when you guys are writing for an entire class, of students, how do you guys, or can you talk about the challenges of maybe trying to balance, like, the voices of each character?
Yeah, I mean, when you're doing a scene with a lot of different characters, I think you got to pick your moments, and what you want to do is you want to make sure the scene feels full so that you are going to a few different characters, but you don't want to get off track of what the scene is really about. So I know we love it when you get to write, like, a Mitch and Chris thing, where they're arguing about wrestling, or they're, who's going to have the ass face nickname or something like that. So it's like you want to find your little pops of those students and making sure, like, you're getting a really specific perspective from them. And it always just depends what the scene's about. If it's about all the kids feeling good, then, who are the characters you want to go to that, give you that idea in the clearest sense or in the funniest sense. If the scene is about, the kids are all struggling, then who do you go to who is the voice of that? And who is the sounding board in that scene? Are they talking to Johnny himself about things aren't going well, or are they talking to someone else in the class? So you're just always looking for, like, the right combinations of kids, and there are some kids you guys know that feel like a pair all the time, which is like Chris and Mitch and, Bert and Nate when they're, so, like, you're looking for, people that give you sounding boards for your characters, and you always want to make it feel like you're getting a different voice from everybody, and that can be tricky, but you have to look for the things that make the character unique to dig into that.
I have a question. Speaking of iconic scenes, quite possibly the most painful 38 seconds of television ever you guys wrote, and it was completely silent. But I spent the entire 38 seconds screaming at the screen, say something, say something.
Yeah.
Were there ever any plans to have them speak to each other? Or was it always going to be silent in that elevator?
I love that you asked this, because, Luan, do you remember the moments in the room when this was, like, a conversation about this?
Yeah.
This was an episode, actually, where John, Josh, and Hayden were busy for some stretches where they weren't in the room for, like, maybe an afternoon or two during this run, where, we were working out the details of this episode, and we had this card on the board about Johnny and Daniel in the elevator, and we came up with this idea that they get in the elevator together and they say nothing the whole time. And we were like, is this insane? Like, is this idea going to get through? Is there a chance that this actually gets to screen this way? Because there were so many things that you're like, well, he might say this, like, there's this thing you're going to leave unresolved if you don't say this. So there was always some doubt, but there was never a line of dialogue written at any point. I will say that, because when the guys came in from their meeting or whatever it was, and we pitched it to them, they were into it. So that, thankfully, it's one of those that from the beginning we knew we were taking a risk, but I think everybody knew that, and I feel like pays off because it's just like,
I mean, they say it all with the eyes. The eyes say it all. You don't need to say anything. They know it. You're hearing that conversation, even though you're not hearing it, just by looking at them and how they're standing. I mean, that was powerful.
Yes, it's like they forgive each other, but they still hate each other, but they understand and they blame themselves and they blame and it's just this big giant mess that I don't think you ever could have gotten across in dialogue, but Billy and Ralph do it with their eyes.
Yeah, I mean, once in a while, you just lean on your actors and you lean on your audience. Like that's a scene where if you don't trust your audience, you never write that scene, because there's always an instinct in some kinds of shows to hold the audience's hand or to tell them what to feel, tell them who to root for, and things like that. And what's great about this show is that we don't always do that. Some of the best scenes in the show are ones where you're feeling for both characters and you don't know who to root for, and you don't know which side you're going to be on at the end of it. So we're always looking for stuff like that, and that is true to every character. And when we see people talking about like who the bad guy in the show is and things like that, where my brain always goes to is like, if you're saying that there's a bad guy in the show, then I think you're making the same mistake that people watching Karate Kid originally make, which is like I'm not open to seeing the other perspective because I haven't seen that person's backstory, or I haven't seen like what made them that way. So to me is like what you're really saying when you see a bad guy is that my life experience doesn't line up enough with that person to understand where they're coming from. So like Kreese, for example, is a character that obviously you can cite him as the bad guy, and there are many, many things that you can look at for that. But also, how many of us have been in war? Like, how many of us know about Vietnam? Like, how many of us know about those things that are deep in Kreese's backstory that may like make him make decisions like that? So, and I think you can look at that with all our characters, and this show is, becomes about giving those backstories so that you can understand those characters. Like, all of those build-ups for Johnny's character are the things that buy you the elevator scene.
Yeah.
So you guys kind of talked about, oh gosh, how did she word it? Well, there's that expression like killing your darling. So you guys talked about like the no dialogue and leaving it in. What about the stuff that, I guess at the last second decision was made that, no, we're not going to include this line or something like that. So in terms of the writing, is there something that you guys really loved but had to kill it for whatever reason?
I think there was probably I'm thinking like in the school fight, probably there were some things that, that you get like more of the smaller fights going on and things like that. I know there was at one point, and we can't get into detail on this stuff because there's always scenes that you may use later, but there was a scene that gave you a little bit more of Dimitri before that fight, and got in terms of like his training and things like that may have made you see his interactions with Hawk in the fight in a little bit of a different way. So that's the one that jumped to mind of like, and it's honestly always scenes like that where it's, a scene that is not critical to the story. And it's usually, a character that isn't like the A story in that episode or the main story in that episode. And so things like that fall off. But what I'll say in general is 99.9% of the stuff that gets cut for the right reasons. And it's about the flow of the episode. Sometimes it's about tone. Sometimes it's just like, how much time do we have? How long have we been away from a Johnny story? All of those things factor in, and the guys just have their finger on the pulse of like what, when something gets cut out and when it doesn't. And there's really nothing that I would look back on and say that was a mistake to cut ever at this point. So,
I keep coming back to like iconic because you guys wrote so many like amazing things, and as this is blowing up, as this is blowing up all over Netflix, the scenes that people keep talking about were yours. It's the school fight. It's the Johnny and Daniel. You know, here's the payoff we've been waiting 2 years for, and you guys got to write that. So how in depth was that fight actually on the page, compared to, because like, okay, with the school fight and Johnny and Daniel's fight, and there's one kick that Daniel is the only one who doesn't do it. You know, Miguel kicks Robbie into the banister. Robbie kicks Miguel over the banister. Johnny kicks Daniel into the TV. It's the same kick. Did you guys intend that, or was that Hito? Or
no, I think that's usually Hito doing that stuff, and they're so just tuned into like what's needed story wise. So they're always aware of like when it's the right time to, you know, do those little rhymes. But I think for the Johnny and Daniel fight, I think, you know, the work was done to get them to a place where you can have them fighting, because like it's Daniel's daughter in there.
Yeah,
and
that was
like all of that stuff factors into it. And, you know, we don't get into detail too much on, you know, what kind of kicks and things like that. Really what we feel responsible for is the shape of it, and, you know, if a character has an upper hand in a certain moment, you know, you want that because that stuff is tied in the story. And also just how the fight ends. You know, you only have a little bit of time in that fight because you have the kids right there. So you want to get enough of that fight where you're feeling like, I'm getting some of this rematch stuff that I've been dying to see for all these years. And you're seeing that they still got it, and you're seeing that they're, you know, a pretty good match. And then, you know, just at the point where you want to see where it goes next is, you know, where it has to end. Because that's not where we are in the story. Is seeing who wins that fight is not really the answer to anything in that episode. So, but the fight itself is needed. I don't know, Luan, is like, when we're writing our fight scenes, does that feel like that's basically, I know the school fight, there's so many elements of that too. But.
Yeah, the Johnny and Daniel, I remember we went back and forth a lot because we were debating on who was going to win it. You know, like, who would win that fight, and does that kick mean Johnny won the fight because he grabbed him at the end? Like, you know, it was like just like a little internal debate between Joe and I. Was like, well, you know, it seems like Johnny had the upper hand. And it's like, well, but actually Daniel had the upper hand. So it's kind of, that was sort of us working out our process. But it looks like, you know, from what we see, it's like it was a pretty even fight. Even though between us, I have a version of who I think won, and he has a version of who he thinks won.
We won't reveal who was on what side. But also, it's like, ultimately, and again, this is like our safety net thing, is like, ultimately, it's not really our decision. The guys get to make that, but we get to steer it in the direction that we think. So, you know, everything in our script is a version of a blueprint that we think, like, this is the best way to build this thing. And sometimes, a lot of the time, or I'd say most of the time, really, the guys agree with all that, and it's just adding, you know, little details onto it, and you know, finding things like that are the changes. And, you know, every once in a while, it's a big change, but usually that's a discussion that we all have as a group together, that, you know, if we're really changing the structure of an episode or changing a scene in a major way, we're always involved in that stuff, because the guys are just incredibly collaborative.
And we got to do, you know, and I would say, like, you know, the whole room, and we, you know, I think we did the work that season to get them to that fight. You know, like, we saved it enough for that fight for it to work between the two of them. And I think it paid off, but, you know, they didn't.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'm glad they didn't. My opinion is that if they ever do get into it, when they do get into it, neither of them will win. I think they'll just beat each other to a bloody pulp, and somebody will have to stop them like the kids did. That's my opinion. So
it always depends what kind of fight it is, too. Like, you know, an apartment fight is one thing, a school fight is one thing. You know, you know, whose turf are you on? All of those things are factors.
When you guys are writing the script, can you talk about, you know, incorporating lines from the original movies, or, you know, little Easter eggs that were kind of written in? Like, in my opinion, I feel in Glory of Love, when Sam and Robbie are getting thrown out of the skating rink, kind of mirrors Daniel getting thrown off the soccer field.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we always look for things like that, and sometimes you find it naturally, like that a scene is the same, and then sometimes it's just like lines. And Luan and I are guilty more than anybody of like trying to make a little wink to a line, an original line. I know if you guys have seen enough of the episodes we've written, you find plenty of that happening. But it's always just the balance of, what, is this going too far? Is this, the right thing coming out of this character's mouth and all those things? You don't want to do it where it's not in line with the character that's saying it. But a lot of times, the scene shapes. I mean, listen, The Karate Kid's an incredibly, smartly written movie and well structured. So if you're doing a scene that mirrors a scene in The Karate Kid, you're probably doing something right because they had it figured out. So I think we're always okay with that. I don't know, Luan, is that?
Yeah, I think I think there's a balance to it, right? You don't want to do too many, and I think luckily so far I think we've been able to strike the kind of the right balance of it. But it's like Joe said, the movie's pretty perfect. So anytime we have the ability to kind of call it back or call a line back, and that's a nice moment. It's a nice moment to be able to do.
Just in general, I've kind of always wondered this because, continuity is like a big thing to me. I'm really stupidly pedantic about canon. Is there a written show Bible, or is it all in their heads?
I believe there's an equivalent of a written Bible somewhere. I don't even if we searched in our emails one, we would probably find it. I do think there is one, but I will say the primary reason for it probably is if you bring in like a new writer or something in a future season, you want them to be able to catch up and know what you just want to have those things handy. It's not something that I know you guys would certainly like to have your hands on it because there's just there would be all
little tidbits.
But most people, it would not really a useful document outside of okay, have we said this character's birthday in the show? Things like that, where you want to make sure you're not going against things that are there. So it's ideally you want to have a document that you can search for things like that to know. But to be honest, a lot of the writers have been on from the beginning. I know Luan and I have been on from day one. Michael's been on from day one. Stacy. So there, it's very rare. You'd be hard pressed to find something for us to put in a show that somebody would flag that that person's not that old or something like that. I know you guys will probably be able to find some if you haven't already, but usually between all of us, it's going to be tough to end up doing that.
Okay. Brianna, I got a couple more questions before we can get into listener feedback, the ones that you collected.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Now, I don't know if this is going to be spoiler. So just, if you guys cannot answer, I totally understand. They don't deliberately say it in No Mercy, but do we know if Tori is an actual student enrolled there?
At West Valley?
Yeah.
Season 2?
Yeah, I think we do say. I mean, I don't know if it's explicit in that episode, but and I don't think we're in spoiler territory there. It's it was the first day of school for everybody, and Aisha does say.
Yeah, she does say that.
Aisha does say early in the episode is not showing up for the first day of school is not a good sign. So
right, okay.
Yeah, Tori is enrolled at West Valley on that first day for sure.
All right.
And she chooses to go somewhere other than class.
She wants to have a very special first day.
Yeah.
I think at that same time, isn't Miguel texting Sam? Or wait,
No.
Miguel's texting Sam.
He calls Johnny.
He calls Johnny.
Yeah.
So
he calls Johnny.
yeah. So there's a few things going on in that scene. Brianna?
My last question for you two before we get into the Twitter questions is really kind of silly. So Hawk has his here's Johnny moment with Dimitri, right?
Yeah.
But that's 2 seconds after being halfway down the hallway. So I just have to ask, does Hawk have magical teleporting powers, or did he dig tunnels under the school?
The video game's coming out. They got powers.
He's
Hawk,
got wings.
yeah, Hawk moves fast, and I think I know, at least the way I know my high school, like I could get somewhere pretty quick if I had to, knowing the shortcuts around that place.
You can have, like, I think in certain labs, I remember this in my high school, you can cut through a lab and get to the other side of the hallway the geography would work, I think.
I think
Honestly,
so too.
we don't know for sure. I mean, it's always one of those things in, when you're shooting like a huge set piece like the high school, you have to, like, when you're doing kind of breakaway scenes from that, you're kind of looking for the ways to make the geography make sense, because sometimes the location itself doesn't have the ideal way to do it. So that's something that gets solved. The directors and everybody involved in location scouting and things like that are usually like really on the ball and as much as possible, like trying to make things make sense. And then sometimes in the editing room, like it's one of those things where it's like, well, we don't need to see him running this whole time, things like that. Like people will buy that he gets here or he doesn't. But I know you guys are on the details, so you got to keep us in check on stuff like that.
Brianna?
Yeah. Like Sam is 14. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my last question. I mean, first of all, like every episode is great, obviously, but Glory of Love is one of my favorites just because it gives us the cries, it gives us the laughs, many of which is also from like Johnny's, dates, right? So I guess I have I don't know if it's a two-part question. I have kind of like two questions kind of relating all together. The return of Judy. I kind of want to know how you guys thought about bringing Judy back for one of the dates. But during the bar scene, we also see Johnny composing something to Allie. And then, obviously, one of the last few sequences in No Mercy, we see that phone request. Can you guys talk a little bit about that and the idea of incorporating that?
Yeah. Do you remember the Judy thing, Luan? I think maybe it was Josh had that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there were versions of Johnny dating where it was just like one bad date, but there was just so much fun to be had with like the different kinds of people on the app he would meet, and it's just like when it got to that place, it's just like we just went full in on the comedy of it, and the Judy thing felt kind of perfect because you needed something that felt like an ending in a way that was like, okay, Johnny's headspace at the end of seeing the Judy thing is like, oh my god, screw this app. Like, yeah. But he's still in the headspace of like, thinking about, what dating was like in the old days, and that those are the kind of things. And he expresses that to Miguel. Obviously that's where you get the bump from, which was one of our favorite things in that episode is Johnny telling Miguel about like you in the old days it was like you bump into the girl pretty hard and then you buy her beer, like that kind of thing. So for her to sort of steal his move on that, when we knew that we wanted the Allie message to get sent, and there was just a lot of debate about like would Johnny really send it and things like that, and the compromise in some way was to like get this bump where he would send the message, and then I think we may have reverse engineered it then where we wanted the bump just to not be out of nowhere, so we made it like the bump itself had meaning because it ties into like what Johnny is looking for in a woman and all those things. So, and I know once in a while we'll see like fans and people talking about like, oh my god, she was perfect for Johnny. Like,
I will say my favorite part about that scene is like we get to do a little bit of a wink to Coming to America when he went on all those dates with Arsenio Hall, and so for us it was like that's one of my favorite comedies of all time. So like it was just, able to kind of
that's
wink,
my favorite comedy. So was there any like do you guys think about having like rapping twins at one point at all? Like can we get some of that?
Never say never.
Never.
I just saw in the chat someone referred to that character by her name, Melissa, which I know we had in our script, but I don't even realize like you guys really dig deep to be. I don't know if it's in like subtitles or something. Remember the woman who bumps into Johnny's name is Melissa, but I don't think we ever say it in the show.
No, it's in the credits, and Jenna Shaw. Yeah, I interviewed her too.
So yeah, there you go. Props for that.
That's why I always read the credits because you'll learn names. That's how I learned Nate was Nathaniel. Everyone just kept on calling him Asian Bert, and me being Asian, I had a problem with that. And I was trying to tell people he's got a freaking name, use it.
Right.
Yeah. We always use names in the room. I will say that there's no one on the show that we refer to as like this person. We have names for everybody.
Everybody's got a name.
That's awesome. Oh, we may have to reach out to you when we want to know some names.
Yeah, because we're still trying to figure out which Paul is which, because apparently we have like 4 or 5 of them. There's a Paul in the game. There's a Paul on the show. There was a Paul in season 2. Yeah. But I have to. I lied. I have one more question. I have to know: was the White Snake video you guys' idea?
Oh yeah, Vanessa said that was like a last second edition.
Yeah, it was. I know the shoot itself was pretty run and gun, but the Johnny Dream being a music video was like a long-standing idea. I will say it's so hard. I wish I could tell you guys like whose ideas were what, but it's so hard once you're in the writer's room and doing the episodes and stuff like that. It's like it's one of those things where like someone will pitch like, we should do a Johnny Dream about Carmen. Oh my God, we should do like a music video. Oh my God, we should do this and this, and then it becomes like 8 people's thing. So it becomes like borderline impossible to track. That being said, I'm sure someone, I'll get a text from one of the writers saying like, that was clearly my idea. Like,
it'll probably be Hayden.
It may be. But that's a sequence that just like, man, that's like a perfect thing because it's just like, it hits on all cylinders and it's just like you're in Johnny's head for a little bit and it's wonderful.
So Brianna, if you want to grab up those other questions, I saw one in the group from Christy. She asked if the Ginger Twins have name or the Ginger Twins, the brothers. Do they have names?
Yeah, we
other than Big Red and Little Red.
I think they have.
Big Red?
Okay, so you exposed me because I immediately lied.
Oh no!
We call them Big Red and Little Red.
Yeah, the Reds.
I do think they have names that we may refer, but I don't want to say them in case it ever gets to like a thing where we're using their names as something in the show, just in case. But we do call them Big Red, Little Red, and I don't know if they have. So those are the writers' room's names for them. So.
Okay, so looking at Twitter here, we did get some questions submitted from Carrie. Unfortunately, I think I stomped all over her question. What does writing a fight scene look like? Do you envision specific moves or more that what you need the fight to do to support the story?
Yeah, it's more the latter. But there are times where there may be a specific move that we're trying to look for, but even when we do that, that ends up being a conversation with Hiro about like what the specific thing is. I know
But Johnny for the headbutt on Graham, that was a specific thing to do.
Right. Yeah, we wanted to use that. There's definitely you want to make sure at least that the things that you're calling back or the things that are necessary in story are mentioned in the script, and that go through all the way. But usually it's we're more focused on the plotting of it and not not super specific, but once in a while, like I remember we at some point Hiro told us like stop writing like Superman punches into things.
Like
it's like that's the kind of thing we'll do because us not knowing none of us knowing karate, it'll be like okay, a cool visual, like he jumps and he does the Superman punch, and Hiro's like stop doing that. I'll get you like a cool thing. Like don't worry, you don't have to. So.
Okay, next question is from Ellie M. Your favorite characters in the series, favorite characters to write, and your favorite character interactions.
Oh boy, that's a good question.
Oh, that's a good question.
Do you have a favorite character to write? I know because we sometimes will like trade scenes that we write in like our process of things, and we'll like split things up.
Well, I feel like I know your favorite character to write. And I would probably say Dimitri.
Yeah. He got on that one because like that's Dimitri is, and I mean I told you guys the story about like the glasses and all those things. Like my attitude is like very sarcastic, and like I'm also a huge Game of Thrones fan, so I'm like looking for pop culture thing. I know a line that Luan and I did write for Dimitri was the hooker run. where it's like, I got my ass kicked, I gave him my money, like, that's how hookers live. And then Miguel being like, come on, you don't know him like I do. And then Dimitri going like, yeah, that's hooker talk. So that's how I joke. I can tell you that. So, like, I'm in Dimitri's head a lot for those things. And it's, I don't know, it's fun to be writing a character that you feel like, all right, he can reference things that I would reference. Like, I play Dungeons and Dragons, and so there's just like a lot of overlap with that character for me.
So you're the necromancer?
Yeah, me and Michael are the ones in the room that are like, okay, guys, we got to talk about some nerd shit now. Like, what is it?
Yeah.
So we
call it the nerd shit.
Yeah.
Love it.
So I would probably have to say, I think Miguel. I know that seems like the safe answer, but like, I don't know. Something about that underdog kid. Something about him coming up and, going through it and getting, literally going from a 0 to, just winning the tournament and just being badass. And he's got, he's my favorite, I think.
And in terms of like character interactions, I know another character I love writing and one that you get the best interactions from is Amanda.
God, yes.
And I know Courtney gets mad like at us specifically because we'll sometimes write lines for her that are really like tongue twistery, where she's like saying a bunch of things in a row like very quickly. But that's just like something really fun about her character is she's just a very fast thinker and is on her toes and like knows what she believes in any given moment. And her also being a little bit of outside perspective is just like a very fun character to write. So that's another good one. And then of course like writing Daniel, and I know I talked about that before, but I just like feel like that connection with that character and some reverence for the Karate Kid, and now like knowing Ralph a little bit just helps with all of that stuff and just makes you feel all those things.
And the Robbie and I'd say the Robbie and Johnny scenes are always they're always great because it's this this father trying to reach his son, and it's those are always good. My probably favorite scene with those two.
Chopper Keeper, that's a good line.
That was us. I remember.
Yeah. So I kind of want to piggyback on the Amanda talk, but do you guys find it challenging writing for women? Do you ever reach out to a family member or like one of the female writers to ask, how do I convey this from a woman's perspective?
I mean, I think it's a case for almost every character. Is like there's always going to be blind spots, and you have to like challenge yourself as a writer to be able to do it. But you have to know also where your limits are and know where your strengths are, that, and also know if you're. We never write all of these scenes that we write in all the episodes. It's never just our eyes on those things. There's Stacy and Matea, and it's just like there are some really great people who have eyes on these scripts as well. And it's this, to a lesser extent, is like, it's almost like my version of nerd shit. And I know it's just a different thing. It's like I look at it as like, of course, we'll all do our best and write these things. But if there's someone that knows better than we do, then you always want to be able to lean on them and draw from your life experiences and draw from theirs as much as possible too.
Next comment on Twitter is from Logan Castleman. He just said, "So they are who I have to thank for the best fight scene in any TV show ever."
and Hiro and Janelle and the stunt team and John, Josh, and Aiden, and we'll take
actors
as much as you can give us. We'll take.
Were you two in the hallway when that was being shot? When the Oner was being shot, were you there?
No, we weren't there for that one. We like we said, like a lot of our stuff is, and we'll have to come on after season 3 with you guys. There's a lot of. We were on set for most of season 3 stuff, so we'll be able to give you some insight into those things. But we get a lot of. I think we were with them maybe a week or two after that scene was shot because John was showing us the Oner on his phone. Yeah, because we were there when they were shooting some LA stuff. When Johnny and Miguel are doing their Back in Black. Driving the car. Those things.
Episode 2.
We were around on that day. Doing some of that fun stuff, but
I remember John showing us on his phone and being like, "What? Holy shit! What?
We need to upload that."
Yeah, there's a lot of pictures of him showing people, that on his phone, like everybody huddled around him watching it. So, next comment or question from Happy Harry Hash Brown. Why wasn't there a Sharks versus Jets dance pose before the Rumble?
As coming from Gallivant, where we started many years ago, we thought about it.
Yeah. We're always looking for the musical element of it, and I know we always reference for this show, like some of the touchstone references are like The Outsiders and Warriors and things like that, because there is just a certain element of like, the gang thing happening, and I know we're always looking for like clever ways to wink at things like that and feel like, so if you're getting those feels, I think it's a good thing. As long as we make you still feel like you're like really in our show and not on a different planet. That's always the balancing act.
So Sam reading a book that Ralph Macchio played the main character of in the movie was your idea?
Listen, once in a while we're going to get some of that stuff in there.
That's the fun. That's what's fun.
There's always a question of like, and I don't even know if we know the answer. Is like, is to what extent is Cobra Kai a shared universe with either like another property or like with Ralph Macchio movies or like with Three Ninjas, all this thing. So all of those are viable questions that we don't have answers for. But keep an eye out always for stuff like that, because any chance we get to be a little like clever and shitty and winky at things, there's a good chance we're going to take it.
Yeah, because we're huge fans of all that stuff too. We're
Yeah.
huge fans of The Outsiders.
The fourth wall is still standing, but it may have a few cracks in it. So, and last question is from Dorothy, who's in the chat. What scene or dialogue in the show do you wish you wrote or came up with because it was just amazing?
And
I have a jokey one.
Yeah, you got one, Luan?
I have my jokey one. You're a big man, Dad.
Oh.
Yeah. The Rolands are carrying the...
Yes.
Yeah, I mean... God, there's so many that... Like, I know I mentioned the one earlier that, the get off the spectrum kind of thing. But I feel like... I don't know, I'm thinking of some of these, like, Robbie scenes and, like, the wheel technique and things like that, looking at it in the show, it like, makes perfect sense, but it's also, and like, the cement mixer and things like that are just so clever that, when we're pitching on, like, training and, what Johnny's idea of a lesson and things like that could be, the fact that we sometimes end up with something like that feels so far off of where you would start, which is like, okay, he's teaching, front kicks or whatever. Like, so for us to be able to get from that to like a metaphorical, thing is just always, it's one of the cool things about having, so many smart writers in a room is you whatever your starting place is, you end up in just like such a different amazing place that you never would have, like, on your own, you never would have been able to do it. And that just speaks back to like Luan and I writing together and being in a writer's room together. Those are scenes that are borderline impossible to come up with if you're by yourself, because it's all about like building on everybody's ideas.
Yeah.
I have another question since we're kind of talking about characters. I know that John has answered a few times now on Twitter that there's enough hints. At one point, it's called right out, but Tori's last name being Nichols. Can you give insight on when characters are being introduced and how you guys go about picking names like Mitch and Chris, who are the two leads from Real Genius?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it all depends, because like sometimes Luan and I, if we're writing characters in the script that like, it's sometimes you don't talk about what the name is going to be of, like, that Melissa is just named after one of my friends. So like, it's sometimes you're doing that, or you're doing a family member, or like,
Graham is my brother-in-law's brother.
Yeah.
It's Graham.
Yeah. So exactly. So sometimes you find And in a weird way, it becomes like a little trick for you as a writer too. Is like if you can pick a person who feels similar to that character, it makes it easier to write in some ways, because sometimes you can just think about like how your friend would react in a situation, and a little bit right to that. So, a lot of times it's a thing that gets figured out usually in the script stage, because when you're presenting a script, say to the studio, or in our case to John, Josh, and Hayden, the character's name is their face in some ways. It's like you don't get to send a picture of them like who you're imagining all the time. Like sometimes you do, but a lot of times you have to rely on that character's name and your description of them to be the thing. So that's how you get a character like who owns the cement truck yard, or who owns the cement truck. His name is Cutter, because that tells you who that character is in a very in the quickest possible way. So it's something like that actually does get a lot of thought gets put into that, usually, and it becomes helpful for us as a group to be able to remember the characters and all of those things. So we always look for ways to do that, and once in a while it is like a wink, like Mitch and Chris, but other times it's just that you're trying to get them the face and the name to match, and help out casting when they're casting this character as well.
Okay.
Along the same lines, real quick, I don't tell us because we haven't been told yet, but that leaves Dimitri as the only main cast member whose last name we don't know. Does he have one?
I think he may from our original season 1 stuff, but it hasn't been said in the show. And I don't. What I will say is, like, if there is one, it's definitely not one we can say, I think.
Right, yeah.
It wasn't Tanzit's last name, was it?
No, I mean, I don't know if there even was one for that. I know you guys heard Tanzit's story on that thing, because that's also a thing where, like, once in a while, a character's name will be something for so long, and then you have to change it, like, the day before you shoot that character for some reason. Like, if the person you cast has the same name as the character, sometimes you won't change it, or it's too close to another. You realize it's too close to another name that we have to use. Like, so it's a weird thing where, like, even when we were writing stuff, knowing that we had changed the thing to Dimitri, like sometimes you're still calling him Tanzit when you're pitching things for him. So it's just like a weird thing. But yeah, I don't know if the Dimitri last name is in the world at any point. But I would expect, if we do as many seasons of the show as we'd like to, that you will see more of his family. I mean, that's true of every character, that you want to go into their lives a little deeper. So that's something like that's always on the table.
Okay. 2 more questions for me, and we'll end it right there, so we're not taking up more of your time.
Oh, this is great.
So 2
awesome,
questions.
right?
Oh, sorry.
It's awesome. We love doing this. So.
Oh, okay, great. Well, we'll kind of see how it flows. So Owen Morgan is in the stream. He's always he's a big supporter. He's been on our streams a number of times. So he wants to know if Bert has a last name, and then kind of Luan, going back to Graham. We have one of our group moderators is from the UK, and he's wondering the character of Graham, like the idea of making him a Brit.
My brother-in-law is British, and his brother's name is Graham.
Okay. So it's not just a name. So it was like the whole thing. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, oh, British guy. It's like Andrew. No, Graham. His brother Graham. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounded.
Yeah, and I think, that character too, it's like something like that seems so minor, it's just like making him a British character, like becomes a big deal in like the way you view that character and his interactions, and him like kind of being shitty and sort of like cheating on Carmen. Like all of that factors in a fun way, and it also gives you like just like the way Johnny interacts with him is just makes it more fun, because it's like he's calling him mate, and just Johnny squeezing his hand really hard, and it's like all that stuff. Like specificity is your friend when it comes to things like that. To answer Owen's question, we cannot reveal that, because you never know. You never know.
All right, Owen, we'll give you a cone for that question. People get that joke.
Speaking of Graham, the actor who plays him, had mentioned that there was a line about a man snake that was cut. Did you two write that?
I don't know. We had a lot of Graham stuff, and we also do a thing where actually this happens less on this show than some other shows we've worked on, but we do alts, which is sometimes in your screenwriting program you'll be able to add a different line like where the same line is. So a lot of times, like if there's a joke about something, we'll put in an alt next to it because then we can let the guys like John, Josh, and Hayden pick which joke they like the most or which version of a thing they like the most. So sometimes there's just like an endless amount of those that Luan and I have that we love. And, it doesn't take we feel okay doing that most of the time because, it doesn't take too long to read 4 or 5 jokes. And sometimes you find like a great one that you aren't sure that the guys would like, but it does become hard to shoot all of those. Yeah. So it's really about like picking one. So I don't know offhand. I'm sure we had a lot of good lines because we enjoyed writing that character.
I remember we had a ghost run. I remember we had a run on the ghost thing. Don't ghost her. I remember we had a run. Yeah.
We had like
don't you haunt her. I don't even...
Yeah, we had like extra lines for that because it was so funny to us. But it also like at a certain point it changes the tone of that scene if you do too much of it. But we definitely had like Johnny saying like what do you mean? What are you talking about? Like ghosts or something? Like you're gonna scare her? Like
yeah.
Like thinking that he's gonna like scare her, like not knowing what ghosting was. So we always have fun with those kind of things, and it's always a joy when we get to write Johnny montages and Johnny 80s music videos and things like that because we have a million ideas for that kind of stuff.
Brianna, anything else before we wrap up?
Well, Ellie is asking actually a really, really good question in the chat. How do you brainstorm character arcs, and can you talk about writing the complexity, like Hawk's badass front, but weave in the vulnerability in between? And I mean, I think that's the fantastic question because you see that with Johnny and you see that with Daniel, and like every character has this front and then underneath. How do you express both? Because you do it wonderfully.
Yeah, that is a really good question.
Yeah, it's really good.
I'll say a word that always is like a big word in the Cobra Kai writers' room is headspace, and I know you guys have heard us say it, and maybe you've heard John, Josh, and Hayden say it. It's one of the things that we're always talking about is tracking where a character is in that moment of their story. So I mean, Hawk is a really good example of a deeply complex character that you want to be able to show both sides of it. So when he's having a hard time with Moon or something like that, you need to be able to see Eli underneath that. And that character, more than any other, it's on the complexity is on the surface because there's like a duality to him. Like you are doing a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde, but that approach applies to every character. I think that you can say the same thing in some ways about Daniel and his. Daniel has like a hot temper, and he's prone to making mistakes. Like he'll. If he raises the rent on you and things like that, he needs like Amanda or someone to pull him back, and he needs to go to Miyagi to like find balance because he's making those kind of mistakes. So, you want to look for that for every character, that there are two sides to their story as well, and that's just like the theme of the entire show in some ways.
And I think one of the fun things for us is when you have the choice. It's always the choice that they make to do that. It's that moment where Hawk makes that choice. It's that moment when Miguel, he makes the choice when he's in the pool to keep swimming, to keep going, to flip the script, to do whatever. It's like everybody, we all start the same, but it's like, what's that choice that you make to be badass, to go on and do this thing, or to kind of stand up on, and that's, for us, that's the fun. It's to find that moment to make that choice. Because at the end of the day, we're all the same.
Yeah. To that point, like I sometimes think of the Game of Thrones scene where Stannis has Sir Davos and the Red Woman like on each of his shoulders, and it's just like I sometimes go back to that because it's in some ways it's so like on the surface of like angel, you got the angel and the demon and like a God and the devil on one shoulder, but it is sometimes helpful to think of a character as having those two things, you know, in every scene that they're doing or in every choice that they're making, like which side of that is winning in this scene. And sometimes that allows you to get, you know, Johnny into a headspace where he's going to fight, and then later in the episode you may have him in a headspace where he is having like a father-son conversation with Miguel. So yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and the answer is just like, know your characters, know the world, and if you do those two things, then you're usually going to make the right choices and be able to show a depth of character. Because if you love the characters as much as we do and as much as all the fans do, then it's not hard to get to dig into what their lives are like, you know, even if you're not seeing every scene of it.
Who came up with the idea, or can you give insight on the idea of putting Samantha in a Cobra Kai T-shirt in Johnny's apartment?
Yeah, I think we definitely wanted like something like that. That if Daniel sees that in conjunction with all of the other things of not knowing what happened to her the night before, of Johnny trying not to let Daniel in the apartment, like it's like a little bit of a perfect storm, because it's almost like that's the headspace that it requires to get Daniel to do what he did, which is like kicking the door in a way that you can argue is strike first. I wouldn't say that probably. I mean, Johnny like really pushes him enough where he's kicking, but you know, when you get Sam in the Cobra Kai T-shirt, like that's the thing that maybe gets him to the next level where he lets the temper take over. As I was just talking about, it's like the sort of duality of that character is like sometimes the anger takes over and he says something to Robbie that he may end up regretting. You know, he kind of pushes Robbie away in that moment where he might not have done that, you know, unless that perfect storm happened.
It's almost like an emotional bottom for Daniel at that moment too. It's like, what's the worst thing you can think about for him, for his daughter? It's not only to be at Johnny's apartment, and now she represents everything that he's been fighting against and hating his whole life. It's like, that's his bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And that scene, I'm actually really, really glad you brought it up, because that is, I'm a huge Daniel fan, obviously, always have been. And I consider Ralph to be like the be-all and end-all of knowledge when it comes to Daniel. But that particular scene, slamming the door in Robbie's face, Ralph was like, no, Daniel wouldn't do that. And I'm like, oh, yes, he would. So did you guys have to argue with Ralph about that? Because that's completely in character for Daniel as we know him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I know, like, we have our bodyguards, which is John, Josh, and Hayden, who take on those arguments for us. But, you know, you always want to hear every side of that thing, because, yes, I mean, Ralph's been living with this character longer than any of us, and you have to make sure that if you're doing something that could be argued is out of character, that you are motivating it. And you know, you're not always gonna have like the fullest agreement on those things, but everybody knows that like all our hearts are in the right places, and I do think you know, we feel like we got it far enough where he could do that to get in there, but I don't know. It was something that was debated really the whole way through, and not in a bad way at all. It's just like that's a creative conversation that you want to be having.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, he did slam a door in Mr. Miyagi's face too, so there's basis for it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's right.
He's got that. He's still got the Italian temper. So
Yeah.
whenever we're writing Daniel scenes, I tell him like, listen, I'm writing Italian. Like, you're gonna tell me I don't know how to write this? Like, Italian kid from Jersey, I got this. No problem. Also, I can say that because, like, you know, we've now spent a lot of time around Ralph, and you know, like, we're like friends now. It's just kind of like a crazy thing. Like, I get texts from Ralph sometimes about like hockey, and our teams are playing each other in the NHL playoffs right now. So he's maybe not talking to me for that reason, but we do have we have a bet going also on that. So there's like it's kind of surreal to like be able to have a real like deep creative conversation with someone that's like, you know, also you're friendly with, and you know exactly where they're coming from. So it's
We can understand. I mean, John, Josh, and Hayden. John more so is very approachable on Twitter. You know, he answers a lot of questions, so totally get it. Being able to get into conversations with him. All right, Brianna. Anything else? We're into like an hour and a half.
Yeah, I could talk to you two for hours and hours and
Same.
hours. This is you're. I mean, it's fascinating. You can give us insight into all kinds of things that I just love it. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Of course. I mean, we love this. I know we've kind of been in the Josh area of like not being that big on social media and things like that. But I think, you know, now that everything's on Netflix and we're getting new fans and all that, certainly you guys, people can feel free to reach out to us and we'll try to answer in non-spoilery ways and try to give insight into some things where we can. But I mean, the fans, like, and just a credit to you guys for being at the forefront of this. The fans have been incredible in this move to Netflix, and none of this happens without everybody pulling in the same direction, and just like all the fan art's amazing. So it's like we're in the same boat as you guys. We're just massive fans, and we feel like we're just getting, you know, to do the best job in the world and write some of it. So,
and thank you for having us, because this is like, you know, it's a dream for us to talk about, you know, Cobra Kai. This is awesome. We love.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been wanting to talk to the writers, but I felt like, you know, I had to get enough interviews to kind of show that I'm legit.
You guys are great.
Anyway.
This is awesome.
So if you guys do welcome that interaction, do you want to throw out your Twitters or your Instagram if you are okay with people following you?
Yeah, I'm at Here Goes Joe on Twitter, and I know you guys can probably find us through this stream or whatever. If you guys, I don't know if you guys want to post those kind of things, but certainly feel free. I don't do Instagram. I have a Facebook that I check occasionally, but literally 90% of my stuff is finding fun Cobra Kai things to retweet. So we're around.
I think my Twitter handle is Loopy718. That's where I mainly kind of check this stuff. Instagram's all pictures of my kids. Okay. That's how I engage it there.
All right, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up there, and we'll record our own intro outro, Brianna. So if you could just hang on tight as we, you know, thank everybody in the chat room for those that tuned in live. You know, this was amazing speaking with you guys, obviously, but yeah, we'll go ahead and end the feed. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.